Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Resistance Live. It's the 27th of September, 2024. I'm still really sick, you guys, so I'm going to do my best today to get through this without a coughing fit. I've got medicine in my body and everything else, but thank you for being so patient with me while I was off the last 2 days trying to get better. It's really just a cold. It's not COVID or anything else, but I appreciate your patience with me. It's very rare that I actually have to take off a couple of days of the regular schedule, but I got knocked sideways by this thing. So welcome back. Today for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a chocolate colored turtleneck sweater. My hair is pulled back. I have my thin gold hoops in. I am a pink skin, green eyed, dirty blonde haired woman, and I am in front of my oak cabinet and a stack of books, including my book, which I just moved to the top, and my plant. And I am coming to you, as always, from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. Okay, so yesterday, Jack Smith filed his enormous evidentiary brief in the DC District Court in front of Judge Chutkin related to all of the evidence that he has gathered related to Donald Trump's conduct up to and including January 6th in that prosecution. We know it's a bombshell. Somebody asked me a question like, how do you know it's a bombshell? Well, we know it's a bombshell because we know it includes new evidence. He signaled that he was going to include new evidence in this brief. We know at least 90 pages of it is what's called a proffer, which is where evidence is submitted to the court demonstrating the evidence that would be admitted at trial in the event that it goes to trial, which of course we expect that it will. And this will include all the evidence that has been gathered in the investigation, much of which is not yet public. I mean, this is one of the things that's really fascinating about this is that we know for certain that there are things contained in this brief that have never been known to the public before, because we know that the DOJ and the FBI has interviewed people, has gathered evidence that has not been available to the public, including things like cell phone records and the like. So while we may have seen some of this related to the January 6th special committee, there will be things in this that will be new, okay? And what happened here is that the brief was filed under seal. For those of you who don't know what this means, it means that the brief is filed confidentially with a copy that is redacted that will be reviewed by the judge for redactions before it is filed on the public docket. Things can be filed under seal and never see the light of day, but that's not how it's being handled here. So we are waiting for Judge Chutkin to approve the redacted version being filed publicly on the docket. And once we have that, we will see the totality of what it is that Jack Smith has against Donald Trump. This is obviously like a very big moment, not just in relation to this prosecution, but also in relation to the election. I expect we're going to learn some things that are really horrifying that we don't know at the moment. I also would expect that we're going to learn some new witness evidence that we haven't heard before. And so I'm actually really excited about this. Now, reminder, the brief itself, including the proffer of evidence, is about 180 pages. So it may take Judge Chutkin through the weekend to review this before we get a publicly filed redacted version on the docket. But we could get it today. It depends on how fast her law clerks are working. So this is very exciting. I think it's going to be really good stuff to drop probably the day before the vice presidential debate, because reminder, the vice presidential debate is on Tuesday. And we'll have to see what happens next. But I personally think this is likely to be something akin to, a radical conversation starter for the remainder of the election. Let's put it that way. So very exciting stuff, and more to come on that within the next couple of days at the absolute latest. Okay. Yesterday was also the appeal in the New York civil fraud case. That's the case that was in front of Judge Engoron that found civil penalties to be assessed against, the Trump organization and Trump himself and Eric and Jr. and others to the tune of more than $400 million. Now, I read the summary of someone who was in the courtroom, and it does seem as though the judges had some concerns about the amount. Okay, and I'm just going to say something. There is one judge on the panel that is reviewing this that is rumored to be sort of like a pro-Trump judge. And there was one judge, in the way that this was reported, who seemed to be asking a lot of questions of the prosecution. It is not terribly unusual. I wouldn't say it's common, but it's not terribly unusual for very large civil verdicts to be reduced on appeal. So I will say that on the basis of what I read yesterday, and again, this is total tea leaf reading speculation on my part, but the summary was very good. it seems to me as though there could be a reduction in the amount of fines here. There was some debate on the record in the appeal yesterday about like who really suffered the harm. Was it the banks? Was it the general public? Isn't this something that is an intra-business dispute rather than something that Letitia James should have gotten involved in? It does not sound to me like it's likely because of the makeup of the panel that the whole thing is going to be overturned, but it does seem as though there is a possibility that the amount could be reduced. Now, I always have to say this, never say never, because litigation is unpredictable, appeals are unpredictable. But I will tell you that if I was going to game this out, my suspicion would be that we'll see some reduction in the amount of the dollar amount. And that in and of itself is also not the end of the world, because I'm going to remind you all, the bond that was put up was $175 million or thereabouts. So even if it's cut in half, right, there's still an enormous amount of money that's going to go to the state of New York. And it's still a lot of money to make a dent on the Trump organization. And also reminder, all of those business entities are currently in receivership. So Donald Trump, I think, is likely to be completely out of business in the state of New York, completely. And we will see what the end result is on the verdict itself when the appellate court rules, which probably will not be for another few months. It definitely won't be before the election. I mean, I guess it could be, but it's highly unlikely. Okay. So the other big breaking news yesterday was the indictment of Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City. Now, you may wonder why this is something that could have an import on a national level. I mean, in addition to the fact that it's like the nation's largest city, Eric Adams is a Democrat, although he really honestly, for all intents and purposes, is a Republican. He ran as a Democrat, but I've never really thought of Eric Adams as a Democrat. And he's also a carpetbagger. There are a lot of people, myself included, who really wish we'd had Maya Wiley or Catherine Garcia. I have never been a fan of Eric Adams. He's a former cop. There are a lot of things about him that I have not liked from the very beginning. But this indictment itself is really damning. I mean, it seems very clear that back since when he was the Brooklyn borough president, he's been taking bribes from Turkey to alter New York City policy in favor of that nation. And that he did so even when up to and including when he was running for mayor of the city of New York. And most disturbing for me, and I think for a lot of New Yorkers who lived through 9/11 or who were there in the aftermath, he apparently ordered the FDNY to override their refusal to certify the building containing the new Turkish embassy, which is like a 30-story skyscraper, which was going to fail fire department certification. I mean, I was living in New York when the blackout happened. I had to walk down 49 flights of stairs in Midtown and all the way home. I'm just going to tell you that the idea of a building, let alone post 9/11, that does not meet fire department standards being forced to be certified anyhow is like terrifying to me on every level. So there's a lot about this that is insane. Now, immediately, we've seen Democrats call for his resignation, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And nonetheless, Trump is trying to weaponize this because he's saying that the only reason why the Eric Adams prosecution started was because Eric Adams started complaining about migrants being dumped in New York and how immigration was really the issue. And all I have to say about this is that Trump will weaponize anything possible to try to score points in this election. None of this should surprise anyone. You should expect the most insane garbage to come out of his mouth at every turn, no matter what the developments are that are coming down the pike. Excuse me for 1 second, because I want to keep going with you guys. I totally lost my voice for 48 hours, you guys. So the fact that I'm even speaking now is sort of miraculous. Okay, so I don't think, somebody asked a question on the Patreon feed about whether or not I expected that there was going to be blowback to Democrats here. I think that the answer to that is no. Because unlike the Republicans who lionize people who commit crimes, every single time this happens in our party, which isn't very often, we immediately call for resignation. The same thing happened with Senator Menendez here in New Jersey, who now has resigned. When he was indicted, Democrats across the board called for him to step down. So the idea somehow that this indictment is going to be bad for Democrats is a non-starter. And I'll just say one other thing. The New York City public advocate is Jumaane Williams, who I adore. I met him as a part of a mass mobilization that I organized in 2019 with a bunch of other people. He's wonderful. He's an incredible advocate for New Yorkers. He would be the interim mayor until a special election could be held. He's more than qualified for the job, just like a tremendous New Yorker. I just love him. And I think that New York would be far better off if Eric Adams is removed, frankly, because apart from anything else, if you haven't been following this, he's been doing insane things like allowing the NYPD to shoot people for fare evasion on the subway, while simultaneously taking bribes and using like $10 million in taxpayer funds to benefit another nation. It's like nuts. So I would be very pleased to see him go. And I will also just say that I think former Governor Cuomo running for the mayor of New York is a non-starter. That's also like a nightmare for me. I can't stand that man. I have friends who were, in his inner circle with all the sexual harassment and everything else. And I don't think there's any chance that he's going to be elected. But in any event, we'll have to see how this all plays out. But I do not think that there is any likelihood that this is going to blow back on the Democrats. Now, somebody's asking whether or not I think Governor Hochul is going to remove him. That's a hard call. Hochul is not, I'm not a fan of hers either, even though she is a Democrat. I really honestly don't think very highly of her for a variety of reasons, including, but not limited to the mask ban and the commuter tax, all sorts of other things that she's done that are not really great for New Yorkers. She may choose to remove him, but I think the greater likelihood is that she would try to force him to resign rather than take something that drastic. So we shall see. We'll see what happens with that. But, to answer the question of, is there going to be blowback to Democrats? I think not. All right. We got to talk for a minute about the 60-day rule, because many of you will remember that there is this rule inside the DOJ that says essentially the DOJ can't do anything within 60 days of an election that's likely to have an impact on the election itself. I need to make something really clear here because there were some questions about it on the Patreon feed this morning. That only applies to new matters, all right? So for folks, for instance, who are like, why isn't Trump being indicted under the Logan Act for like talking to Netanyahu and maybe meeting with Zelensky? It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but why isn't he where's Merrick Garland? Like somebody said that this morning on the feed. Well, first of all, Merrick Garland would have to appoint a whole new special counsel to do this because Trump is running for office. But in addition to that, we're within the 60-day window of the election. So no one should expect that there's going to be some new announcement about a new indictment of Donald Trump between now and November 5th. However, and this is really, really important, ongoing matters don't stop. Okay, so someone asked a question about whether or not Jack Smith's new brief would be considered a violation of the 60-day rule. No. And in fact, the DOJ announced this months ago that, there was not going to be any attempt to slow down or stop any ongoing prosecutions in advance of the November 5th election. So just please understand this. There are limits on what the DOJ can do, but it's not going to have any impact on anything that's currently ongoing. All right. So let's just wait and see what happens. Zelensky did meet with Kamala Harris yesterday, and I'm just not particularly worried about this. No, Trump shouldn't be doing it, obviously, but at the same time, look, Zelensky and conversations with Trump and everything having to do with Ukraine was a part of the first impeachment, and I don't think there's any chance that Vladimir Zelensky is going to be swayed in any way by anything Donald Trump has to say. Okay, let's talk for a second about downstate, down local voter interference. So there were lots of questions this morning about the mayor of a small town in Wisconsin removing a voting box. Lots of questions about voters being scrubbed from the rolls. I have a humidifier. Thank you. Do me a favor. Let me just get through the broadcast. And I know that, I appreciate all of you caring so much, but I got it covered. Okay. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think I could get through it. All right. Let me just say a couple of things about this. We know that there is going to be an enormous amount of attempts on a state and local level to interfere with the counting of ballots. There's lawsuits now seeking to have absentee ballots that arrive after Election Day but are date stamped before Election Day not get counted. That's not going to work. We know that Mark Elias is on all of this. Mark announced this morning that he thinks there's going to be an enormous amount of new lawsuits. That means he's filing them in the next few days. They're on this. All right. And the thing that I just have to, make sure that everybody understands here. Let me get the troll. Bye. The thing that everybody has to understand here is that there are going to be attempts at the state and local level to interfere with the election. By the way, this has been ongoing. This should not surprise anybody, right? Like, Georgia, after the 2022 midterms, started shutting polling places in various largely Black districts to try to interfere with Black Georgians being able to vote. So no one should be surprised by any of this. And yes, shenanigans are afoot. That's one reason why I've been telling all of you for the last 3-4 months to please check your voter registration at least once a week. Please make sure that you're telling everybody that to check their voter registration. Please make sure that you understand how you're going to vote, how you're going to turn in your ballot. If you have a mail-in ballot, are you going to drop it in a drop box? Please do that. Don't stick it in the mail. The whole reason why I've been telling everybody that like postcards to voters have got to end like around the first week in October because we're worried about the mails. Like, all of this is predictable at this point. And they are going to like throw everything at the wall to see what sticks, okay? Our obligation as organizers and mobilizers is to make sure that everybody that we talk to knows how to vote and is doing everything that they can to make sure that their vote is counted, okay? No one should be panicking about this, all right? There's still, I feel like I have to say this like almost every day now, which is fine. I know that a lot of you are really worried about like the idea that Trump is going to steal the election. That, first of all, I'm just going to say this, that's not going to happen. There are efforts underway to interfere with the ability to count the vote. But Mark Elias and Kamala Harris's well-armed legal team, and by armed, I mean she's got like 10 times the number of lawyers as the Biden campaign did in 2020, are ready. They're prepared. And we can't control any of it. Okay, that's the other thing that I just want to mention here is like you, average everyday mobilizer in your community, cannot control what's going to happen with, unless you want to volunteer to be a poll worker, which by the way, that you should, it is beyond your control what the attempts of interference are going to be here and how they're going to be handled in the courts. So our job is essentially to make sure here that we do everything that we can to mobilize the vote no matter what, and that we tell everybody we know how to vote, and that we make sure that they know how to vote, that they have a plan to vote. And then we move in the direction of doing it straight through November 5th. All gas, no brakes, as everyone is saying these days on Threads, all right? So please don't worry. I mean, you can worry if you want to, but really the antidote to worry is getting the job done. So that's really where we need to be on this front. And, also please trust that Mark Elias and his people know what they're doing. The ACLU Voting Rights Project knows what it's doing. They're out here doing everything that they possibly can to defend the right to vote and to make sure all votes are counted. So just keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward. Like, that's really the answer. Don't get stuck. Bye, Billy. I'm going to ban you. Just make sure that you just keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. Keep doing the work. It's incredibly critical. Okay. All right. Somebody asked me a question about Pennsylvania. So look, the Harris campaign, as I mentioned earlier in the week, definitely has announced that they need more volunteers in Pennsylvania. Now, I will just say this, at least from where I sit right now, when, my parents are in Pennsylvania, everything that I'm hearing is that there's plenty of volunteers there. But the Kamala Harris campaign did last week on the volunteer call, I think it was Sunday, tell everybody that they did need more volunteers in Pennsylvania. So guys, stop giving me health advice in the comments, please. I have it covered. Okay. Like, I'm a grown woman, 53 years old. I can take care of myself. Thank you. I appreciate your concern, but I really don't need health advice in the comments today. Please, if you are in proximity to Pennsylvania and you have the ability to get on a bus and volunteer and go knock doors, please consider doing that. Please consider doing that, okay? I do think that, like here in my town, I know that every Saturday, there are buses that are leaving at 9 a.m. and going to Pennsylvania and coming back at 5. So if you have the ability to do that, please do it. But please do that if you're in proximity to any swing state. Like, Pennsylvania is not an exception to this, all right? So I urge you to consider traveling to knock doors if you have it within the capacity to do it. Okay, I'm going to start blocking people. Never mind. I'm going to leave this alone. I'm ignoring every single comment about my cold right now. All right, I'm just ignoring it. I'm completely ignoring it. All right. Okay. So do what you can for Pennsylvania if you live in close proximity, and that's it. All right. Okay. Had a question about whether or not undecideds are really undecideds now. This is something, by the way, that has been going around for quite some time at this point. This idea that we've just got like one returning troll, you guys. This is not more than one person. This is the same person coming back repeatedly. Okay. Question about undecideds, whether or not they're really undecideds at this point. And I have to say that, like many of you, my view on this is that no one is actually undecided at this point. There are people who are trying to find a way to justify voting for Trump, or trying to find a way to justify voting for third party. There is no one who is actually undecided, because you can't really be undecided in this environment, right? It's not like Trump and Kamala Harris are equal candidates in some way. It's not like one of them has like a comparable economic policy to the other. You know, like Trump just wants to tariff and tax, you know, like everyday Americans to the tune of $4,000 more a year and give tax breaks to the wealthy. And Kamala Harris actually has an economic plan that benefits the middle class and working people, right? These two things are not the same. And I truly want people to understand that it's not the undecideds, quote unquote, that are the issue. It's people who are disengaged or disaffected, people who think their vote doesn't matter, people who are not paying attention to the election cycle. I don't know how it's possible, but that's where we are. There are people who just like are not engaged in this. And those are the people that we need to get out to vote. Those are the people that we need to make sure are moving in the right direction and understand how to vote and are registered to vote and are planning to vote. That's the market that we need to target. It's the folks who are not undecided, but who are just not engaged. And that's really where the meat of the matter is at this point, okay? So please make sure that you are doing your best to talk to people in your community where you live and go door knock in swing states to make sure that people know how to vote, where to vote, and that they should vote, all right? That's really what it's all about, okay? All right. Final question for the day was about, and every time you guys ask this, I kind of have to laugh. Somebody asked a question about, like, how do we get podcasts and the media to talk more about Kamala Harris? Okay, so I have to remind you all that, like, we can't. Because one of the reasons why there is such a focus right now, particularly in mainstream legacy media on Trump, is because it gets them dollars, all right? Again, I have to remind you all, like, the Olivia Newsy thing is just like one more example of this. They are not invested any longer in telling the truth. They are invested in news for profit, which means inevitably there is a skew. The whole reason why, like, you know, it's the horse race between Donald Trump. Donald Trump says the most insane things that like make absolutely no sense, that have no basis in reality. The other day he claimed that furniture sales were down and that was a sign of rising communism, right? They're not reporting on that. And that is because, and meanwhile, they're like, Kamala Harris doesn't have enough detail in her plans. They want a horse race because it makes it easier for them to make money. So please don't, you know, like, we can't influence this in any way. I mean, you can influence it, I suppose, by getting your news and commentary from people who are independent, like me. And there are some other really good women and marginalized people, commentators out there who you should be supporting. But please understand this, okay? You're not going to be able to influence, like, CNN to do more accurate reporting on Donald Trump or more accurate reporting on Kamala Harris at this point. You can simply choose where you're going to get your information and your news and your commentary. That's it. And as I've said many, many times, we are in a mainstream media reckoning right now. There's going to be a lot more to deal with on this after the election itself. There's definitely going to be a lot more fallout. I am not going anywhere. I know people keep asking me that question. I'm not going anywhere after the election. I'm still going to be here. But please understand this. There is a critical importance to grasping that a lot of things, you know, this whole cauldron of change that we're in right now, this incredible, like, it feels like a portal sometimes of incredibly fast movement since Kamala Harris took over the ticket. And now, like, that moment is not just happening in politics. It's happening in every aspect of American life. It's happening in every aspect of American business. And it's not over. Like, this is now, you know, like the end game of everything that the last 10 years has led up to. And we're going to be in a place at this point where we have a lot to ride through, even assuming that we take back the House and hold the Senate and elect Kamala Harris as president. Okay. All right, that's it. I'm going to go before I start coughing so much I can't finish a sentence. Thank you for sticking with me for 24 minutes. I will see our Patreon subscribers on Sunday for Progressive Coffee Hour. Reminder, if you want to join us, become a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/ResistanceLive. Coffee Hour is our more loosey-goosey broadcast for Patreon people only every Sunday. Look forward to seeing all of you there. And please don't forget to hit the like button, the bell button here for notifications. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps to tell the algorithm that you like what we're doing here so that it will send it to more people. Okay. Thank you to all of our paid subscribers. You help me to pay my staff behind the scenes, help me to feed my kids, and allow me to do this work 6 days a week, along with a lot of other things that I do. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Next week's going to be really busy. Vice presidential debate is Tuesday. Okay. And that's in addition to a lot of other breaking news that we're expecting to come through. So lots of love to all of you. I will see you all here on Monday, and I hope you all have a great weekend. All right. Bye.